Hello, hello, hello. My name is Jack Taylor, and you have reached Imagine Easter Part 24. Now, few of us can imagine the cost of Easter carried out on a Roman tool of torture. There are enough historical accounts of the cruelty experienced by victims of crucifixion that we don't have to go into the details here. Thinking through this, we see why Jesus sweat drops of blood the night before as he wrestled to do God's will above his own human desire for survival. The dark side of us wonders why the scripture writers won't describe the horrors and suffering. But Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John have something else in mind. They want us to understand the character of Christ and his commitment to God's design for our salvation. They focus on 7 phrases which Jesus gasps out from the cross. These sayings focus on forgiveness, on a promise of salvation, on protection and provision for a mother, on personal agony, on trust and need, on the completion of a task, on the consecration and submission to the Father. So let's look at these sayings briefly. The first is in Luke 23:34. And here Jesus says, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Now, this seems to be addressed to the soldiers tasked with crucifixion. Maybe it's broader than that, but these Romans have stripped him, they've flogged him, they've crowned him with thorns, they've beaten him with a staff, they've ripped hair from his beard, they've mocked him, they've whipped him as he stumbled under the weight of the cross, they've nailed him, and they've gambled for his clothes. This is not an easy forgiveness. Others sneer and mock him, daring him to try and save himself. Well, Jesus instructed his followers that if they don't forgive others their sins first, then their Father wouldn't forgive their sins. So he shows how this works at the darkest of times with the cruelest of sins. So even on the cross with his last breaths, he teaches us. In Luke 23:43, we see the second phrase, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." Is this assurance for a saint, a disciple, his mother? No, it's addressed to a criminal nailed on the cross next to Jesus. Now, one criminal has been mocking and the other has been defending him. He says, one criminal says, "Save yourself and us." He's echoing the religious leaders when he says that. The other says, "We are punished justly, for we are getting what we deserve, but this man has done nothing. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Remember me. It seems to be enough to be saved by the one who is 100% God and 100% man. A promise is given to provide hope to someone in the last hours of life. Today you'll be with me in paradise. A guilty someone who knows they're guilty. A guilty someone who can't do anything to earn acceptance. A guilty someone who can't do anything to say thanks. So on the cross, with his last breaths, he accepts guilty sinners into his kingdom. The first into his kingdom. In John 19:26, we see a brief focus on someone close to his heart. Near the cross stands his mother Mary, his aunt Salome, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. But Jesus focuses on only one woman, his mother. She's standing next to John. "Woman, here is your son," he says. Then he looks at John, "Here is your mother." We don't appreciate the effort to gasp out those words in the midst of his own torture. But Mary had 4 other sons to look after her. They're not believers. John has his own mother, Salome, standing right there. But Jesus tasks John and Mary to find comfort in their loss with each other. He looks past his own suffering to take care of his duties as a firstborn. Despite his own suffering, he acts to ease the suffering and loss of those that are closest to him. Then we come to Mark 15:34. It's a heart cry from the deepest pang of suffering. Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani. My God, why have you forsaken me? We've already seen that this is the first line of Psalm 22. And those who stand by, they hear the rest of the psalm echo in their soul. It continues, why are you so far from saving me, so far from the cries of my anguish? And the remaining words paint a picture so clear that not the hardest zealot can miss the reality. I'm poured out like water. All my bones are out of joint. My heart has turned to wax. It has melted within me. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd. My tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. You lay me in the depths of death. The scene is unmissable. Mockers insulting, pierced hands and feet, bones on display, divided clothes. But then there are these words, I will declare your name to my people. In the assembly I will praise you. For he has not despised or scorned the suffering of the afflicted one. He has not hidden his face from him, but has listened to his cry for help. All the ends of the earth will remember and turn to the Lord. All the families of the nations will bow down before him, for dominion belongs to the Lord, and he rules over the nations. Do we see here the cry of a man abandoned to suffering, or the cry of a victor calling others to celebrate? Perhaps here is one who feels with us in our deepest sufferings, while at the same time stretches forward to the joy beyond. The writer to the Hebrews calls us to this example when he says, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. In John 19:28, we see the first indication of personal need. Up until now, he is focused on everyone else. Now he says, I thirst. But wait, what is the context for that? Later, knowing that everything had now been finished, and so that scripture would be fulfilled, Jesus said, I am thirsty. Perhaps this is another reference to Psalm 22:15, or perhaps it's a reference to Psalm 69:21. They gave me vinegar for my thirst. What happens when he says this? John immediately notes a jar of wine vinegar was there, so they soaked a sponge in it. They put the sponge on a stalk of the hyssop plant and lifted it to Jesus' lips. Is Jesus so aware of the minutest detail of Scripture outlined by God for him that even this, at this time, is acted out? How could we imagine that he might overlook some small detail in God's plan for our life? After taking the vinegar in John 19:30, Jesus says, it is finished. Now, most of us have heard that this is a financial term, meaning that the debt has been paid in full. There is nothing more to be done. We know the debt wasn't his, and we also know that the debt was ours. Isaiah 53 says clearly that God laid on him the iniquity, the sin, the debt of us all. It says, surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. There are no more bulls or lambs required. There are no more acts of penance to gain acceptance. There is no more groveling for mercy, because mercy has been given. Judgment has been rendered. Peace has been secured. By one sacrifice, he made perfect forever those who are being made holy. So the writer to the Hebrews tells us. Lastly, in Luke 23:46, we see this final phrase, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. His first words on the cross begin with Father. His last words on the cross begin with Father. He has wrestled through the darkness of the hours. The sunlight disappears for those 3 hours. The curtain tears as the Holy of Holies is ripped open to a world that has been separated from Eden. The cross has become the mercy seat for the blood of atonement, and peace has been offered. He breathes his last. An earthquake terrorizes the mourners as graves split open and the righteous dead arise. People beat their chests. The centurion says, "Surely this was a righteous man." A spear into the heart ensures his death. John says, "I was there. I saw it all up close and personal." Even in death, Scripture was fulfilled, because not one of his bones was broken, as Zechariah said, and they all looked on the one they had pierced. The other two criminals had their legs broken, adding to the uniqueness of Jesus' death. Now, Jesus has lived out the messianic journey step by step, word by word, act by act, until his final breath. The promises and prophecies of God are fulfilled without a shadow of doubt. If we cannot believe it is not the Scripture which is lacking in clarity, it is now time to ask ourselves why this act of love is not enough to draw us to the one who gave himself for us. All of us who believe are swept into this act through Jesus' prayer before he gives himself. In John 17, we read, "I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one, Father, just as you in me and I am in you. May they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one, I and them, and you and me, so that they may be brought to complete unity. Then the world will know that you sent me and have loved them, even as you have loved me." So that is what he was doing for us. Tearing down barriers, opening up bridges, calling us into a unity that shows the world a one-of-a-kind love that can be found nowhere else. So how are you going to show that love today? God bless you as you do.